Hello everybody, I'd like to start the audit committee meeting. I'd like to welcome all attendees and those watching the live broadcast. The Wi-Fi network is Swindon free and the password, all lowercase one word, is success goals welcome. The next item is, have we got any apologies for absence?
No apologies, Chair, but we may have some people joining us via a Teams link. Sonia is obviously on the screen now, but when the external auditors will join us at that item.
Yeah, I did have a notice that Councillor Hopkins will be a little bit late, but he is going to turn up. Right, okay. Declarations of interest. Councillors are reminded that at the start of the meeting they should declare any known interest in any matter to be considered, and also during the meeting if it becomes apparent that they in the matter being discussed. Okay, item number 3 is public question time. Have you got any public questions?
No questions being received, Chair.
Right, next the minutes. Pages 5 to 8. To receive the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of September 2025. I'd just like to say that you have present, and there's Councillor Mayor wasn't actually here, so if you could take him off there, thank you. Okay then, has everybody read the minutes? Are you all in agreement for them to be accepted?
Yep.
Thank you. Item number 5 is the corporate risk register, which is pages 9 to 44. And 9 to 44 is a corporate risk register, and I'm not sure who's going to present it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Katie Bent, Head of Policy Performance and Insight.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. This report sets out the latest risk management activity across the organisation and the current risks specifically that have been escalated onto the corporate risk register. This particular report also includes the actions set out against the recent internal audit of risk management. So more detail of that is provided in the report, and I'll just share some highlights of that later. So as you know, risk is reported to this committee every 6 months. So since June 2025, which was the last report, there have been 2 new items that you'll see that have been escalated onto the corporate risk register. These relate to the financial costs in children's social care specifically, and also there's a risk around the ability to undertake configuration changes needed to some of the case management systems that we use. There has also been one risk that's been de-escalated, and this is related to the risks raised within the internal audit of business continuity plans. So these have now been addressed through the mitigating actions that you'll see in the improvement plans in that area and embedded within business as usual. So that's why that one has been de-escalated. You will see that there are a few themes of risks within the report, so we've just started drawing those out. So particularly related to, firstly, the incredibly difficult financial challenges that face the council. So sustainability in meeting budget remains particularly high risk, and I know that you'll hear more about that later. There are also several risks related to our IT systems, data quality, reporting, and you will see within the mitigating actions against all of those risks that there has been a real increased focus in those areas across the organisation, particularly with key developments like the emerging data, digital and technology strategy, and very much underpin and draw together progress in those areas. There is much more detail set out in the appendix of the report, so all of the risks that you'll see do have actions, and those are reviewed in between these reports as well. And then I'll just draw out and highlight that the second half of this report provides an update on the progress to address the recommendations from the internal audit examining risk management. So this did identify there was a reasonable assurance around the work in this area and ultimately a moderate outcome of that internal audit. But there were several areas that can still be improved, and so the report describes the approach to this, particularly around looking to improve our clarity, consistency and maturity of our risk management framework. So we have made a start on this, and work is already in motion towards these improvements. And the intention is that a revised framework will be developed and implemented through Q1 and beyond next year. And for you as a committee here, this aims ultimately to make sure that you have the information that you need in the most accessible format, easy to understand, and for you to be able to scrutinise risk management. And whilst we have already made some progress that hopefully we'll see in the report today, so things like improving the risk scoring tracking, so you can see that over a longer period of time, there will be further development in this area. So in terms of the recommendations of the report, the committee is asked to review and explore the risks as set out in the corporate risk register. I'd very much welcome any questions on our approach to risk and related to the content of the report. And we also have a number of the directors here who will be able to answer more in terms of the detail of those risks. So,
Thank you. Right, okay. Is there anybody else wants to is there any questions? Councillor Risinger?
Thank you, Chair. One of the things that has never been on there, it's not on this one at the moment, is parishes. I know that SBC are considering talking parishes like taking extra work on. A lot of parishes have said no to it. So with the cost that's going to incur to SBC, is that something that potentially should be included as a corporate risk and can be the extra finances that the borough will still continue to?
I'm a bit perplexed. I suppose. Sorry, Chair.
That's all right.
I'm not aware of, and I know previously in previous years we have had very explicit conversations about these are the sorts of services we'd like you to take on. I'm not aware of those conversations in this budget round, if I'm completely honest. I know we're having conversations with some of our bigger parishes around how they can contribute and be involved in the work around early detection and prevention. I'll pass over to Kirsten around any more detail, but I don't think the sort of money that I don't know what examples you've got because I'm absolutely blind to the conversations that you're describing, but I don't think it constitutes the sort of risk that would probably hit the corporate risk register. Kirsten's the lead officer of the relationship with our parishes. But
no, I don't think there's anything there that we would consider a corporate risk. We are still in conversations with parishes regarding some of the community facilities. We're still in conversations with parishes regarding our proposed model for intervention and prevention, particularly with parishes around how we work together. But in relation to some of the service delivery that was considered previously, I think we accepted the now and it's been built into structures in terms of how we mitigated that cost. So as far as I'm concerned, it's not something I consider a corporate risk at this point in time.
That's fine. Just obviously I attend youth parish council meetings, not just in Hyde, but around other parishes within the ward. So you get feedback from them when they come to the parish meeting for health here. So discuss it. So it's just something that I just felt I'd not ask a question about too. I've been given the answer.
Yeah, I don't think we not since. I don't think in the past couple of years we've had explicit conversations about service transfer. There are assets out there in the community that we have had conversations with parish councils about, but it certainly hasn't. There hasn't been a programme of transfer in the last after the last time we had the conversation about it, which obviously didn't come to fruition with trying to rebuild, trying to build relationships around areas of common interest, which are, working in early health and prevention, particularly for some of those central parishes who have really strong interest in that work.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I've seen on planning applications, I know in Highworth, we're asking for more school spaces. So is that the risk, corporate risk, that if that is not funded by the developers, would Swindon Borough Council have to fund that?
Yeah, I think you make a good point, actually, Councillor Monroe, around, we have got some current risks that we are talking about that haven't made their way into the corporate risk register, but may do in the future, where we are still awaiting the outcome of some government decisions, particularly around schools in the New Eastern villages. I don't think we're too worried about the funding of schools in other parts of the borough, but funding for some of our schools in the New Eastern villages, where the free school programme has been paused, and we are still waiting to find out whether that is going to continue or not. And that is probably a little bit of a risk that will make it onto the corporate risk register at the next pass of this. I don't think we're too worried about funding schools up in Highworth and other places, but there are some schools that have presumed that we will get government money that may not be forthcoming, but we wait to see.
Sorry, I think the one I'm referring to is the other education. People are asking about £500,000 from the developer. They're going to build about 250 houses in Highway. That's the request being made.
Sure, I think it's really important that we don't use audit committee to get into the weeds of one planning application. I think we really do need to separate two. Obviously, there's an ask from education officers for in any planning application. There'll be an ask from education officers for a community salon or for a school to be delivered on the site. Just because that sum is asked for doesn't mean that sum has to be divided. It is in planning balance, and you have to weigh everything up, and we work with colleagues to try and secure the best pieces. So it's right across the mix. And we consider all the elements in.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry, I'll just add to that, because actually the corporate risk would come out of a sufficiency review that suggested we didn't have enough places. We're doing that sufficiency review at the moment, so until we know the outcome of that sufficiency review, we wouldn't be in a position to say it was a corporate risk. It may very well be that we can absorb some places differently and more creatively, but we've not got to the outcome yet.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I've got a couple. First of all, I was sort of glad to see some of the risks have reduced, but concerned there is a high number of risks in red and a high level of risk that hasn't moved from May to October 2025. Though I'm really pleased that risks are on the risk register and not sort of hidden or not showing. I think it's really good to have the risks highlighted. I wondered if you could tell me a bit more about the two new risks, and also why the risk rating and failure to deliver the improvements in the other ratings on 2 pages are higher. So first of all, just like to ask for more information about the two new risks on there.
What's the second one? The case management. Okay. Sonia, do you want to pick up the case management one, and Claire, will you pick up the children's services finances? Is that right?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, go on.
So I think we've just been having this conversation in a different room. So there are a number of strategies that we're trying to put in place that will support us to be able to meet the increasing demand in children's social care. And that's where predominantly these pressures come from. Increased number of children coming into care, increased number of those children going into high cost residential placement. So the average cost of a children's residential placement per week at the moment is nearly £7,400 a week. So whilst we've seen quite a big impact in the budget in terms of the monetary envelope, actually it's a relatively small number of children. So from May to date, we've increased the number of children in our care to about 35 children. Now we are seeing improvements in our practice. We are more curious. We are looking in more detail at children's plans and the levels of risk and understanding thresholds. Improvements in practice is resulting in more children coming into the right levels of protection and the right levels of our care. So to some extent, we are creating our own additional demand as we improve our practice. We are still below the national average in terms of numbers of children in care per 10,000, so I'm not concerned that we're swinging the other way. We're now about on par with South West averages for numbers of children in care. So it's predominantly children coming into care, those number of those children going into residential care, and the really high cost of that residential care. So there are a number of things we're trying to do to address all of those, both in terms of practice decisions, commissioning decisions, and joint commissioning decisions with our health colleagues as well.
Thank you.
Sonia, do you want to do?
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Okay, yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you, Chair. So the question in relation to the system is specifically around the liquid logic system that was introduced into adult social care 2 years ago. So over the duration of the implementation, which worked really well, there have been some ongoing challenges around the data and accessing data for reporting purposes, as well as some of the systems configuration. So there is currently some extensive work underway with relevant enabling services across the data team, the digital team, as well as across adult services themselves, to sort of de-escalate the risk. We've also got some external support in, helping us to identify where we can make those data improvements at pace, as well as what the ongoing and longer term programme of work will be.
Thank you. It's good to see that you're getting to grips with it and sorting it out. The only other thing that I've got is around the failure to deliver the required improvement for offset services demonstration in July 2023 offset rating have been inadequate. It's gone up 4 points, but I thought there was a lot of work being done on it, and I thought there was improvement.
If I can pick that up, and then I'll let Claire sort of give you a bit more detail. I think it's a couple of things. I think you're absolutely right, there has been lots of improvements. I think over the course of the summer, a couple of things have happened. One, we had a number of we had calls to refer 4 cases to Ofsted, serious incident notifications, where our practice and our decision making probably hadn't been good enough, and children were left at risk of neglect. And that came about. One of them was found during sort of normal working, but that then led us into a world where we were starting to have a look at some of our previous decision making around some of our children. And I think, that led us then to think that we had to refer some others where we possibly haven't been, where we needed to be for our kids. That's one of the main drivers for the reduction. I think the other is that there have been some changes, so that the government changed, on the face of it, did a really good thing where they said we're going to disincentivise how much money people can make by being temp agency social workers, to try and drive people back to permanent social work. And that the government didn't. Regionally, we said that's what we were going to do as a region. And so we removed an incentive, which was you could get £100 for like travel allowance and stuff every week. And it's absolutely the right thing to do, but what it did, because in Swindon you can go to a number of different places, and quite a lot of our social workers, agency social workers, were coming from London. A lot of them went back to London and worked in London boroughs. So we had a real decrease in the number of social workers we had So social workers were holding really, really high caseloads. Some of them still are. We are mitigating that really carefully. And I think I'd probably, especially on the back of the last Ofsted, be looking at this going back up again next time. But I don't know if you want to add, is my explanation significantly good enough?
It's more than good enough. Yeah, and I would agree. I think our 5th monitoring visit has once again showed the areas where we've made quite significant improvements, but sounds right that note of caution is around for us to do that consistently, relies on us having a permanent workforce. And at the moment, we're still not where we need to be with our reliance on agency social work staff. It's improving. And again, there are lots of plans in place to get to that place of permanence with our workforce. Until we do, that kind of limits the improvements that we can make in a consistent and sustainable way. So I think we are, I think holding where we are now is a sensible place, and then by the time we have our 6th and final monitoring visit, we'll certainly be able to talk a lot more confidently about where this risk rating needs to sit.
Thank you for that, and thank you for a very thorough risk register. It's really good to see all the details. Unless there's any other questions, I'd like to recommend that the committee review and endorse the risk management approach and the risk captured in the corporate risk register, but also support the improvements to the risk management approach as set out following the audit recommendations described in 3.11 to 3.15. Is everybody happy with those?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Feel free to read the Wish I had only decided to stay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Just take the chair. What? Right, the next item on the agenda is Treasury Management Mid-Year Review, pages 45 to 58, and I'm not quite sure who's going to present it. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. As the committee will be aware, this is our normal half-year look at what we've done so far, and obviously looking to give you some ideas of where things are going, and obviously that then will feed into the next budget round going forward. So if I can draw your attention to page 46, you've got table 1 there that gives you an overview of the borrowing. Obviously the narrative just backs up what it says here, but the gives you a picture of where the borrowing started at the beginning of the year and where we ended it. As you can see, we started with £429 million worth of borrowing on the 1st of April. At the 30th of September, that had come down to 420. That's mainly due to the fact that cash flow beginning of the year, we can mitigate those loans, we can repay them, we hold them as vacant spaces, and then towards the back end of the year, we replace those loans, obviously trying to mitigate the interest rate costs of carrying those loans. We don't want to necessarily replace them straight away if you don't need to. You've then got the section on investments and lending. At the 30th of September, investments stood at 8.6 million, which is surplus cash and reserves and use of temporary money until such point as we can do it. On average, over the previous 6 months, we've had £35 million invested, generating an average 3.64% income. Going on down, you can see that there's a breakdown there between what the various investment types have been. So liquid investments, fixed term investments, and local authority property fund, which is a long-term, is a long-term investment that we hold and has been there for a number of years now. Table 2 shows you a breakdown of that portfolio and gives you an idea of where we are investing and what is the sort of balance of the funds, if you like. And you've also got a list there of the non-treasury investments, which shows the companies and the one investment property that we own in Bristol. So that's the overview there. In terms of the borrowing portfolio, again, you've got a note there of how that borrowing portfolio is made up. Some short-term borrowing and a mix of long-term, some from local authorities and mainly from PWLB. that takes you through to there. If you then go through, put 3.13, compliance with treasury limits, we have complied with all the limits set out in the TMSS over this period. Housing revenue account, again, the paperwork, if you look at Appendix 1, which starts on page 53, you've got the prudential indicators there that starts off, which shows you what the indicator is for capital expenditure and what our current forecasts are. You can see we're expecting to spend more on capital than we've actually currently forecasting as to our year-end position. And you've got the financing ratios in terms of how much it costs to finance the various capital programmes against the total revenue stream of the council. The capital financing requirement, again, that's the forecast position as to where we think we will be at the end of 25-26. And again, you've got that both the general fund and the HRA. Apologies, the table appeared to spread across the pages, so I do apologise about that. In terms of the treasury management indicators, again, you've got there in table 2, you've got the authorised limit and the operational boundary. The authorised limit is what we is the maximum what we can do without going back to council. The operational boundary is where we think we should, the limit we should be operating within. So at the moment, our forecast is that we're going to be under those, but obviously things may change, but that's where we expect to be, is somewhere well below those various boundaries. The HRA indicators in table 3 give you a breakdown of number of dwellings, the cost per dwelling, and the HRA forecast position at the end of the financial year. So as you can see from that, it would indicate that we are likely to spend more money in the HRA and need more borrowing, and that's reflective of the council's, the HRA's council process in terms of repairs and renewals. So it's always expected that there's going to be a significant uptick in HRA borrowing over the immediate term of the next 2 to 5 years, while they bring everything back on track, and obviously that will then pay down as resources allow. On table 4, you can see all of the fixed term deposits that have happened in the first 6 months of the year. And that gives you an indication of the interest received on each one of those and the durations. So quite a mix of different companies there and different organisations. For the benefit of the company, the SMBC is the Sumitomo Mitsubishi Banking Corporation. Because someone did ask me that from the last time. Their official name is SMBC, but that's what it stands for. We also got on table 5 the new loans that we've taken out. So you can see the first part of that is the loans taken out, the length of the loan, and the interest that is due over the entirety of the loan. Obviously, some of these are spread over a number of years. And then the following part of the table then shows what has been repaid in the first quarter of the year, first half of the year, and the various interest amounts that we've incurred on those various loans. So that is the report, Chair. Open out to questions.
Councillor Wisinger.
Thank you, Chair. On the other non-treasury investments, where we've got the 4.6 million one, I think that's in Bristol, if I remember rightly. What sort of property is it? Just out of interest, is it industrial?
It's a property called Lysander House, which is a number of offices on one of the industrial estates outside Bristol. As I understand it, I think it is currently fully occupied.
Okay, that's part 1. And then part 2 regarding that property is, are we likely to continue with that property in our portfolio, or like we sold some of the major properties in Swindon? Is that one that's likely to go on the for sale list?
Kim may wish to add to this, but my understanding is that it will be reviewed alongside any other asset that the council owns, and therefore will form part of that decision process in terms of what is the most valuable and economic use of that building.
Oh, thank you.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, just referring to the HRA account, I mean, that is a ring-fenced account, isn't it? So the question is really the additional borrowing that's required, and I recognise with the work that needs to be undertaken on our council housing portfolio, we need to borrow. We will need to borrow to invest to get those properties. into a far better condition they currently are in. But the actual interest there is funded as well from the HRA account, isn't it? So it's not like it's adding to a cost to the rest of the council, it's actually contained within the HRA account.
That's correct. Just for the benefit of the committee, the way we're currently treating it is they are borrowing from the council's general fund up until such point as they meet a loan threshold, which is normally a multiple of £5 million. At such point that they hit that threshold, we will then go and look to borrow a loan specifically in the HRA's name. It does have to fit, however, within the council's borrowing portfolio and within the overall borrowing strategy. So they might want, for argument's sake, 12-month loan. If that doesn't fit within our strategy, they might not be able to do that. It might have to be a slightly longer loan to fit within the main strategy. But we are keeping that under close monitoring, and as and when they trigger those various borrowing points, the council will then go and borrow those loans in the name of the HRA, and then, as you rightly say, the interest will then be chargeable to the HRA directly.
Thank you. I'm sure you'll manage that extremely carefully.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a follow-up. Is that within the limit that we've set at the start?
Yeah, the limit that we set is the whole council. We always look at the whole council position for the limits, but obviously within that we've got a balance between the HRA and the general fund in terms of what their needs are. But within the overall limits that we set, that is the entire council position.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, the recommendations are to note the mid-year Treasury Management performance and to report any comments or recommendations to Cabinet for consideration at its meeting on the 3rd December 2025. People happy to agree there? Thank you. Thank you. Right, the next item is external audit value for money report, pages 59 to 110. Would you like to introduce it or Ashley, do you want to start off?
So if Chair, if I could start, then I'll hand over to Ashley. So good evening, committee. So just to remind members of this committee that as your auditors, our responsibilities are twofold. The opinion on the financial statements and our value for money work. This is the report that discharges the latter of those two responsibilities. It's the interim auditor's annual report for 2024-25. And as the Chair said, it starts on page 59 of your papers. And it essentially requires us as your auditors to assess whether, in our view, the council does or does not have effective arrangements in place ensuring economy, efficiency and effectiveness in the use of your resources. So I am joined via Teams by my colleague, Ashley Chan, who is a VFM specialist within our central VFM team and one of the main authors of this report. And she will talk you through some of the details shortly. But before I do hand over to Ashley, I just wanted to summarise a few observations for the benefit of this committee. I'm acutely aware that it is a very detailed report, and that is deliberate, and we make no excuse for that because we are required under the NEO code to go into some detail. Value for money means lots of things to lots of people, but for us it's based on that NEO code, and that requires us to consider your arrangements in three areas: financial sustainability, which is all about budget setting, monitoring, reporting, medium-term financial planning, delivering sustainable services into the medium term within your reserves, balances, and sustainably, and that goes for both the general fund and the HLA. The second area that we're required to look at is governance, and clearly that's particularly important for this committee because you are those sharp governance. and it is all about ensuring that decisions are made on complete and accurate information in the best interest of your stakeholders. And then there's a third area, which is a very broad area, which is the 3 E's: economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. And this is looking at how you deliver your services and are they being delivered in an economic, efficient, and effective manner. So we look at those areas, and if we identify improvements, we make recommendations, and there are 3 different types of recommendations you can make, and these are set out right in the back of our report, in Appendix B, which is right at the back on page 104 of your papers. The most serious type of recommendation you can issue is what we call a statutory recommendation. And these are reserved for the most serious concerns that we identify in councils. They are rare, but they are becoming more frequent. And in the main, they tend to be issued in the area of financial sustainability. Given austerity, you will be aware of some of the challenges of some councils financially, and a number of those organisations have received statutory recommendations. They also tend to be often in the area of governance, where we often come across poor decision making by officers, members, or poor relationships between those 2 groups that are not assisting informed decisions. You may well be aware of Slough having one, I think, financial capacity reserves, and one has been a more recent one where there was a breakdown in relationships, and Warrington was another one where they made some poor decisions around investment properties. So those are the most serious recommendations, and importantly, Swindon are not issuing you with any statutory recommendations, which is positive. The next level down is key recommendations, and these are when on balance we think that the authority does not have effective arrangements in place in one area. And we have 4 key recommendations this year that we're issuing, 2 under the area of financial sustainability and 2 under the 3 E's: economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. And Ashley will talk to you about each of those in due course. In the area of governance, we are concluding that we do think that you have effective arrangements in place, which is a positive. And whilst it's always disappointing to have key recommendations and significant weaknesses in those 2 areas, you are an upper-tier authority, you are unitary, and given the challenges we talked about earlier today, I think on the risk register around adults and children's, maintaining financial balance is very difficult, and you will be aware from previous reports around the challenges around children's and housing. So those are the second level of recommendations, and then the lowest level of recommendations are improvement recommendations, and they're really about refining arrangements that are already deemed to be adequate, and I don't think you should have any concerns about receiving them. They're about sharing best practices. So it is a mixed message, and I think the pictorial, I think there's one on page 65 of your papers, shows that we're in a very similar position to last year in terms of those 2 areas where we've rated it, including the challenge for officers and members to work on those areas to improve them. But I've probably said enough there, and I will hand over to Ashley, who will briefly talk you through each of the 3 areas. Ashley.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So I will start by talking through financial sustainability. So here, this is red rated because of the 2 key recommendations that we've raised, and we are reporting that there are continued financial challenges and that arrangements are under a lot of pressure. So a small underspend was delivered in 24-25, but this was after planned use of reserves, and coupled with the fact that the 25-26 budget was balanced with use of exceptional financial support, and the fact that early indications are continuing to suggest that exceptional financial support will be required to deliver that balance in 26-27, has led to that key recommendation. So it's quite clear that it's increasingly difficult to set that balanced budget given the different demand and cost pressures that the council is facing. So obviously we recognize there is that challenge in achieving financial balance in the medium term, and this in itself is something that we have been reporting in a large and increasing number of authorities. There is a transformation program to address those budget gaps that will aim to make savings and reduce service demand, but that needs to be aligned with the medium-term financial strategy. alongside replenishing reserves to ensure that the council remains financially viable. Continued use of reserves and exceptional financial support is obviously not sustainable in the long term. So it's important that there's work being done to ensure that reserves are being replenished, that the transformation program and savings are delivered in full, and working towards reducing exceptional financial support and reliance on that. So that's the first recommendation under financial sustainability on page 77 of the papers pack in full. The second recommendation is on page 78, and this is a new one that was raised in 24-25 around the DSG Dedicated Schools Grant deficit. So the deficit increased in year at the end of 24-25 and is still forecast to continue increasing. And again, DSG is not something specific to the council and is one of the most commonly reported issues that we see in other local authorities. And Swindon's deficit in absolute terms is definitely not as big as we would see elsewhere, but the current trajectory is not positive. And this was also coupled with an in-year internal audit no assurance report for DSG management, which indicated that there was a lack of effective arrangements in place to ensure that the management plan was realistic with sufficient oversight. So we concluded that effective arrangements were not in place for 24-25. And given the challenges of increasing costs, demand, and complexity around the DSG, it's critical to ensure that there are effective governance arrangements in place with realistic mitigating actions. So as I said, the full recommendation is set out on page 78, and you can see the management response further down into the report. If we move on to the second area of governance, there's an amber rating, which is good and means that we did not identify any significant weaknesses or risks. And in our view, we do consider that there are effective governance arrangements in place for 24-25. And that's important for this committee, given your role as those charged with governance. So we do have confidence that decisions are made based on, complete and accurate information, and that those are in the best interest of the council. And that's not something we see everywhere. So there is assurance in that there are effective governance arrangements in place. And the last area, improving economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. This is similar to the prior year because we've continued to identify the same two significant weaknesses around children's services and housing. If we talk about children's services first, there's an updated key recommendation set out on page 86. So there are still concerns around children's services because the Ofsted inadequate rating remained over 24-25, and clearly there are still challenges there to address. We are seeing a lot of good things that the council is doing in refreshing governance arrangements, and there is positive progress noted in regular monitoring visits from Ofsted. But until there's a formal reinspection that results in a different grade, we would continue to report this as a significant weakness. And obviously in the report, we do reflect all of this positive improvement. And it's just that we don't underestimate the challenges in improving children's services to get a revised rating. And the final key recommendation coming out of our work that remained in place from last year is around housing and the non-compliant judgment issued by the regulator of social housing. So that identified significant failings with improvement required. So we have, again, recognized and reflected in our report that the council has been proactive in doing its own independent internal reviews and then self-referring to the regulator, but there is still significant work to be done in the improvement journey. And obviously it's still quite early days. We're only half a year on from the judgment itself. And the council is making improvements, but it will take time. Bringing performance up to that required standard will take longer, and we will revisit this as part of our work next year. So that was the main points to draw out from the report. Of course, as Pete said, it's quite a long and detailed report, but I also just want to take the opportunity to point out that over the course of the value for money work we undertook, we had a lot of good cooperation from officers, and it was very clear across all of the conversations we had that there is a real awareness of the challenges that the authority faces and how these will be addressed. It won't happen immediately, and it obviously does take time, but we have seen that commitment to address the areas around the key recommendations in our report. So that's my summary, and I'll stop there, but Pete and I are happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ashley. I think when we look at our own situation, particularly when we look at the issues around housing, the children's social care, the DSG budget, we tend to see things in a sort of oh dear, it's a big issue, because obviously it's a concern to us. But you see it across local authorities. So looking at the band of, I don't know, 140, is it, local authorities? If you sort of see that there's some who are in really challenging, very, very challenging circumstances, there's some who are floating along and getting by without too much of a problem, where would you put us? Are we somewhere in the middle, or are we at one end of or the other?
Sorry, Chairman, if I can perhaps start with that response, and then I'll pass over to Ashley to see if she has any further observations. You are on the spectrum, absolutely. So there are. I can only speak for what we do at Grantham. We do 180 of the 500 councils and other local bodies out there. So we probably do 30% of upper tier authorities, and from personal experience, I've issued statutory recs at other councils where, in these areas that we're discussing, the position is so concerning that we need a formal response from the council, because we don't think enough is being done. And as Ashley alluded to, if you take the DSG position, there are some pretty scary amounts of deficits there. They're going up exponentially. You are a lot lower than most of them, but not all of them, and the fact it's going in the wrong direction is a concern. The housing is less of an issue elsewhere, and that is an area where, dare I say, you're a little bit further up the spectrum in terms of concern. The inadequate rating on children's, once again, there are a large number of councils out there with inadequate rating, but there's lots of other councils that have been in that position, they've come out of it. There is often the financial implications of that as well, so that's a further challenge, but clearly that is something that no doubt is all on the council's radar, is actually indicated. So you are not, the fact that you don't have any statutory recommendations or public interest reports, Grant Thornton, interestingly, we did a report last year, I think, on public interest reports, the lessons to be learned from that. And it's an interesting read, and I'm happy to share that around if that's helpful. But it talks about what went wrong at those councils where we are embarking on using our wider powers, which is where we do issue statutory recommendations and public interest reports. We're not in that position yet. But if we find ourselves 2 or 3 years down the line and Swindon still hasn't an inadequate rating, the DSG is going up, then that is the sort of territory where there is systematic problems that clearly council is struggling to address, that we think about those wider powers. So I think we should be concerned about these areas, but I also think that there needs to be that context nationally where the challenges exist. And I think you can take some comfort from what Ashley said about the self-awareness and the drive to improve, but ultimately it's easy for us to say that you need to do it. The hard challenge is actually doing it. Probably said too much there, Ashley. I don't know if you have any further observations.
That was a lot of what I would have said. I think the positive fact to reflect here is that there are no statutory recommendations, which, you know, if we had identified a statutory recommendation, that shows that we think the council isn't doing anything, and that's clearly not the case here. So that is positive amidst the, you know, the national landscape and obviously all of these different challenges that local authorities are facing.
Thank you both for that. I think, you know, we're certainly are very reflective on our own position as a local authority, and I don't think anybody thinks that we don't have these big challenges. But it's useful to understand that it's not totally bleak. There's work going on, and we are in a similar position to a number of local authorities in a lot of these areas. I'm sure that with continued effort and maybe over time some additional support from government in financial terms, hopefully we'll get to the position that we would feel much more comfortable to be in.
Any other questions? Okay, I just got
Deputy Chair, sorry, and I know it's not my meeting, it's members' meeting, but can I just ask a question of process? So I won't rest until we have a C1 in housing and we have a good Ofsted. But what discharges the three? Is it just not being an so if we will require improvement at our next inspection, or we receive 2 at our next housing inspection, that discharges these, is it?
Yeah, so absolutely. So in undertaking our work, we're required to have regard to other third parties that undertake reviews of local authorities. So an inadequate rating immediately results in a key weakness, a significant weakness, and a key recommendation. As I said, it can, if that rating is sustained over a period of time and we're seeing no clear evidence of any stepped improvement, then it can result in a statutory recommendation. Statutory recommendations have been issued in the past because of the continued inadequate rating over a period of time. So if you were to get an improvement rating that will be removed, subject to any other work that we do that could raise concerns that is associated with children or any other service line.
I was just going to sort of comment about how is this being reflected in the risk register? How is it being incorporated into the actions if relevant? But I think a lot of them are on the risk register, aren't they? You know, I think all the ones that you put down, I think I've seen on the risk register, I do think that's in there. The other question I was going to ask the auditor, Peter, is I just wondered about your interim report. Have you started on that, and how's it going?
That's a good question, Sharon. I should clarify. So this is an interim auditor's report. So it isn't the final. We cannot finalise it until we've completed our opinion work. And what we will do once we've completed the opinion work, we will issue our opinion, our audit findings report. We will bring that to this committee, and we will also update the report that you have in front of you today to reflect any changes as a result of that. So the post-statements audit is, we're now 7 weeks in, and it's going well. We've had good cooperation from officers, we're making good progress. There's still work to do, and I've been clear with the team. I actually had a chat with them this morning. The next 3 weeks are really important in terms of actually, because what we did discuss at previous meetings here, and what we've agreed with officers, is that we will look to complete the post-statements cleaning audit by Christmas. And we're probably a little bit behind, only a little bit, and the key challenge is to make sure that we do that, because from both sides, we don't want to be coming back in January and picking up any loose ends. Ultimately, the deadline, the backstop deadline, is the end of February. So we do have a little bit of contingency, but for everybody's sanity, and the fact that, you know, your officers are spending a lot of time, finance officers in particular, supporting the process for 24-25. We've got the small matter of managing the budget in the current year, 25-26, and also the preparation for the budget for 26-27. So the importance of actually for getting over the line before Christmas shouldn't be underestimated. I think it's fair to say Kim might have some views that obviously there's been a bit of illness, hasn't there, that we're hoping isn't going to take us off the road, but obviously we need that sustained final bit of work done to get the work done. But ultimately, my aspiration is that we get the work done before Christmas. We will bring the report to you early in the new year and sign off immediately afterwards. And also importantly, there's nothing hugely significant provided at the moment, but we do have ongoing dialogue with officers, and I'm going to catch up with Kim Thursday.
Right, thank you. Right, so the recommendation is to note the report. Yeah, I think that's it for this one. So is the committee happy to note the report?
Yeah.
Thank you for coming along, and thank you, Ashley, for reporting on it as well.
Send her a message to say that you can know. I did say that once you can go, I'll just. But she can hear it actually, so 1%.
If you press your
Sorry,
mic.
I can't hear very clearly, but
Sorry.
thank you.
I think thank you for attending, and you don't need to stay for the rest of the meeting, but thank you for joining.
Unless you want.
all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just because I love it, don't know anybody else. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, the next item is the annual government statement, and what are the pages in here? Oh, yes, pages 111 to 152, and Lisa is going to talk us through it.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can all hear me. So yes, this is the report to the Audit Committee of the final version of the annual governance statement for the year 24 to 25. Committee are asked to consider the final version and to approve that the annual governance statement is attached to Appendix 1 can then be essentially presented to the leader of the council and the chief executive for signature. That will then become the council's final version of the annual governance statement. As members will recall, the draft statement was provided to committee in June 2025, where members looked at the detailed work that sits behind the draft annual governance statement, and were provided an opportunity of commenting and considering the draft version. I'm happy to answer any questions that members have on the chair.
Anybody want to ask a question?
Thank you. I think there's a lot of detail that goes into this. Thank you and your team for the work they put in. From your perspective, are there any areas that we need to be particularly aware of that might cause concerns in the future?
So the annual governance statement, I suppose, is part of a suite of documents which give an indication of governance and issues that are of significance to the council. I think this is a robust piece of work which identifies what the concerns were. Here, this is 24-25 and a bit looking forward. I think if you align that with the risk register, which gives you a current indication of where risks were. And you've also just heard from the external auditors in respect of their value for money work. I think those things together give a really clear indication, I think, of challenges and risks that are present to the council. I think to answer the question, I don't think there's anything other than what's in these documents, because everything that is of concern should really be identified in here and in one of those other documents.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about on page 135. The financial sustainability is mapping to the risk register, isn't it? I think there are two new risks on there compared to the risk register. There's systems access to and reporting. I think you spoke about that, didn't you? And the timeliness against 20-week performance for EHCPs. Yeah, that's all mapped on, isn't it? So that's fine. That's the only real question I've got at the moment. Thank you.
I think the only thing that isn't, which I've just looked at here, is that there's a reference to the home line service, which I don't think as yet has made its way. It's been on the corporate list, but I'm not sure it's on right now. Can't remember, but I think that's one that we need to. There's not a risk to delivery at the minute because we're popping the service up a little bit, but there is a longer term risk around its viability. It's a tricky service at the minute, which is why it's on the AGS wish list. Yeah, I just sat here reflecting that it probably doesn't, it isn't marked.
Yeah, because we're sort of waiting for an independent member, aren't we? But at the moment, that's going through the process, isn't it?
Yes.
I think that's everything. Questions I thought to ask. Any others? Everybody, what are we supposed to do with this one? Sorry. Right, yeah, so the committee is recommended to approve the annual government statement 24-25 and request that the annual government statement 24-25 is be presented to the leader of the council and chief executive for their signatories. It's getting me. Right, are you happy with that?
Yep.
Right. Right, so it's next one, a head of internal audit and corporate progress report, pages 153 to 170. Nikki, it's over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the report is our regular head of internal update in the format that you're used to seeing, and Audit Committee requested to note the report. To give you some quick highlights, we're currently at 77% of our way through the audit plan for the period up till October. It's slightly behind our target that we were aiming to achieve, but that's due to vacancy at principal auditor's level that we're looking to recruit to. The good news is that some of our PIs have increased to target. We were struggling to get our audits completed and in for review within our 40-day target, but last time I reported that we were outside that time scale, but we brought it within that, and we're improving on a day-to-day basis, which is great news. Our KPI that's red at the moment is the time it's taken from when we issue the draft report to getting it finalised, and that's due to some difficulty in getting management responses from service areas and heads of service. We're working on it with the heads of service to remind them of timescales and to offer meetings and support. And and I'm raising it at directors group so that they're aware it's being reported there too. So we are seeing an improvement, even though it's showing as red at the moment. Other good news to report is the work of the corporate fraud team, which continues for such a small team to produce some incredibly good results. In particular, to date, they've recovered 9 council properties that have been misused, which is an increase from the same period last year. And right by applications, they're also preventing and working on. Just something else that's occurred to me to note. Appendix 1 lists the audits that have been finalised in the period since the last audit committee. And of particular note is the risk management audit report that was finalised in September with some recommendations. And as you've heard from Katie earlier on, they're already working on implementing the recommendations, and I've been party to working groups and meetings where they're actively looking at how to improve the risk management processes across the council. So that's incredibly positive to see that happening so quickly. We've also completed a number of grant claims in quite a short period of time. They're the points that I wanted to raise. If anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions? Councillor Hopkins?
It's not really a question, it's just really to thank you and your team for their diligent work. I'm quite certain that some of these investigations you have to carry out are not fun. They take a lot of effort, and I'm sure the people who are on the other receiving end of them are probably not very happy about it. But the results just keep coming in, and you know, you have to say, without the team, where would we be? So thank you to you and your team for the work that you're doing in this area.
Thank you, Chair. I was the same sort of thing as that, because as I said, and also the fact that you can't recruit at the moment, you know, I don't want that to come into the fact that you're behind, because obviously that's one of the things that, you know, as a council we have to look at. But obviously that's the, but I do think it's, you know, pressure needs to be put on the management team, from the, especially from yourself, Sam, that, you know, they come back to internal audit with the questions that are being asked, because that they obviously bring this red out of it. And you know, I've obviously been involved with audit for a long time. I do think the more pressure you put on them from your end, that yeah, you've only got one amber and one red in there, and you know, I'm sure those will become green very, very quickly. So yeah, again, thank you for all you do.
Can I just add to that, the directors group, with Katie's help, are producing a lot more performance information to help them understand where they're at, and one of those is internal audit recommendations and responses.
And they're escalated to CNT if we've got.
Which I think is good, and you know, it's the right approach to take.
Thank you. Yeah, there's something going on. Oh, about you saying the date of people returning to apply for jobs in audit, and that's gone now. Have you got many applied?
No, unfortunately. We had 4 applicants, and we were able to interview 1. I'm currently going through how to recruit a person, which I need to catch up with him.
Okay, thanks.
But there's an absolute shortage of skilled internal auditors. We were up against Bristol and Gloucestershire, who are currently out for auditors too. And Gloucestershire, I think, on their 3rd. So if anyone wants to become an auditor. You know of any auditors?
I've got Mr. Holmes.
Yeah, my husband's one, but I think he's not going to be trying. And he couldn't work here because I'm cancer. Yeah, what was I going to say? Thank you for so much for all the reports. They've really, really been good. And thank you also, Kim and Sam, for all the reports and everything you put forward. They're really interesting and a lot of information. So, on this one, okay, you're recommended to note the report. Are people happy to note it?
Yeah.
Thank you. I can't remember if there's anything else I was going to bring up. Yeah. The only other thing I was saying about some training, and we haven't really decided if we needed any training. I think I need a refresher in treasury management, really is, but I don't know.
Chair, do you want to end the live stream?
Oh, sorry about that.
Discuss that.
Yes, please.